Full story. A waitress slipped the New York Mafia boss a secret note. True story. A waitress slipped the New York Mafia boss a secret note. What he read left him speechless. New York City has always had two faces. One face is what you see, the yellow cabs, the noise, the millions of people rushing somewhere like they are late for something important. The other face is what you don't see. The quiet meetings in the back rooms of restaurants. The men who never raise their voice because they never have to. The kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. Vincent Caruso was that second face. In the late 1990s, Vincent was one of the most well-known figures in New York's organized crime world. He was not the kind of man who appeared in newspapers or stood on street corners. He was the kind of man people talked about in hushed voices, the kind people crossed the street to avoid, not because he looked dangerous. He actually looked quite ordinary, but because everyone in certain parts of New York knew exactly who he was. He was in his late 50s by this point, a little heavier than he used to be, with thick gray hair combed neatly to the side, and hands that looked like they had carried the weight of 100 difficult decisions over the years. Every Tuesday evening, Vincent walked into a small Italian restaurant on the Upper East Side of Manhattan called Ristorante Bellagio. He always arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. He always had two men with him, large, quiet men who sat on either side of him like bookends. He always sat in the same booth in the far corner, the one with a clear view of the entire room and its back to the wall. He always ordered the same thing, veal marsala, a glass of red wine, and a small pot of espresso to finish. He tipped 15%, not $1 more, not $1 less, and he was usually gone by 10. The staff at the Bellagio had a simple understanding about Table 7. You serve the food, you refill the water, you smile politely, and you do not, under any circumstances, try to have a conversation. The manager had made this clear to every new employee on their very first day, without ever explaining exactly why. He didn't need to. One look at the men sitting at that corner booth told you everything you needed to know. That was the world that a young woman named Rosa walked into on her third week of work. Rosa was 24 years old. She had grown up in the Bronx, the daughter of a man who had come to America from Puerto Rico with almost nothing, and had spent the next 30 years working himself half to death trying to build something. She had watched her father come home tired every night, eat his dinner quietly, and then sit at the kitchen table with a kind of heaviness around him that she never fully understood as a child, but recognized more and more as she got older. She was now working two jobs, the restaurant during evenings and a filing job at a small office during the mornings, while taking night classes to finish her degree. She was the kind of person who moved through the world with her eyes open, not because she was nosy, but because she genuinely paid attention to people. It was this quality, the habit of actually noticing, that got her into trouble. Or maybe it saved her, depending on how you look at it. The first few times Rosa served Table 7, she did exactly what she was told. She kept her eyes down, set the plates carefully, refilled the wine without being asked, and moved on. But human beings are not machines, and after a few weeks, she couldn't help but notice things. Small things. The kind of things you only catch if you are really paying attention. She noticed that Vincent ate slowly. Not in the way a person eats when they are enjoying a meal, but in the way a person eats when they are not really hungry, and food is just something they are going through the motions of consuming. She noticed that his hands, big, thick-fingered hands that rested on the tablecloth before the food arrived, trembled slightly sometimes, a fine, quiet tremor that he seemed completely unaware of. She noticed the way he stared past the men sitting across from him during conversations, like he was not really there, like part of him was somewhere else entirely. And she noticed. This was the thing that stayed with her, the way he looked at his espresso cup every single Tuesday when she set it down. He would stare into that small cup for a long moment, not thinking about coffee, not checking his phone, not listening to what his associates were saying. Just staring, the way a person stares at something, when what they are really doing is thinking about a completely different time in their life. Rosa knew that look. She had seen it every morning on her father's face. It was the look of a man who was tired, not physically tired, the deeper kind of tired that sleep does not fix, the kind that comes from spending so many years being a certain version of yourself that you can no longer quite remember what the original version felt like. She thought about it for a week, then 2 weeks. She told herself it was none of her business. She told herself she was imagining things, projecting her own feelings about her father onto a stranger. She told herself that this was a man who had made choices and lived inside those choices, and that was simply his life and not her concern. But something kept pulling at her. She sat down one afternoon at her kitchen table, the same kind of kitchen table her father used to sit at, and she wrote something on a small piece of paper. She wrote it carefully, in her natural handwriting, which was neat and unhurried. She read it back once. Then she folded it, put it in her apron pocket, and went to work. She almost didn't do it. Standing outside the restaurant before her shift, she stood on the pavement for a full 2 minutes with her hand in her pocket, holding that folded piece of paper, talking herself out of it. This is a terrible idea. You don't know this man. You don't know what he's capable of. You are a 24-year-old waitress from the Bronx, and you are about to hand a note to one of the most powerful and feared men in New York City, like you are passing a message in school. This is insane, but she walked in anyway. The evening moved the way it always did. She took orders from her other tables, carried plates, topped off glasses. At 8 o'clock, the corner booth filled up the way it always did. She brought out the bread, then the wine, then the food, all without incident. The two men at the table talked between themselves. Vincent ate slowly and said almost nothing, which was also normal. Then came the espresso. Rosa carried the small pot and the cup on a tray to table 7. She set the cup down in front of Vincent, the way she always did. And this time, in one smooth motion that she had practiced in her head a dozen times that day, she slid a small, folded piece of paper underneath the saucer. Then she picked up the empty wine glasses from the table, said a quiet "enjoy," and walked away. She did not look back. At the other side of the room, her hands were shaking slightly as she set the glasses down at the bar. She kept her eyes on her other tables. She did not allow herself to look at corner booth for the next several minutes. When she finally did glance over, casually, as though she was just scanning the room, Vincent was sitting exactly as he always sat. His associates were still talking. The espresso cup was in his hand. There was no reaction on his face that she could read from across the room. The rest of the evening passed normally. The two associates eventually got up and went to the bathroom at different points, and it was during one of these moments, when Vincent was briefly alone at the table, that Rosa noticed him reach under his saucer. She was wiping down a nearby table, and she saw it only from the corner of her eye. He slid the note into his palm. He held it there for a moment. Then, with the kind of practiced casualness of a man who has spent his entire life making sure no one knows what he is thinking, he unfolded it below the edge of the table. He read it once, then he read it again. The note said, "I don't know what you're carrying, but whatever it is, you don't look free. I thought someone should say it. Your waitress." That was all. No name, no number, no request. Just those words, in neat handwriting, on a small piece of folded paper. Vincent Caruso sat completely still for a moment that felt, to the one person who was half watching from across the room, much longer than it probably was. Then he folded the note back along its original crease, carefully, precisely, and placed it inside the breast pocket of his jacket. Not in his trouser pocket. Not on the table. Inside his jacket, close to his chest, the place where people put things they want to keep. Rosa saw this, and felt something she could not name. When the evening ended, and the corner booth cleared out, she went to collect the table. The usual 15% was there in cash, folded neatly as always. But sitting beside it was a second folded piece of paper, torn from a small notepad, the kind businessmen carry. She picked it up along with everything else, and didn't open it until she was standing in the back hallway between the kitchen and the coat room, under the buzzing fluorescent light that management had been promising to fix for 6 months. She unfolded it. His handwriting was careful and deliberate, the handwriting of someone who had learned to write slowly on purpose. It said, "Nobody has said that to me in 32 years. I'm not sure I deserve to hear it, but thank you." Rosa stood in that hallway for a long time. She was not afraid, which surprised her a little. She was not proud of herself, which also surprised her. She felt something closer to sadness, a quiet, aching kind of sadness, for a man she did not know, and would likely never really know, who had lived inside a life so sealed off from ordinary human honesty that a single sentence from a stranger had been enough to stop him cold. She folded his note, she put it in her pocket, she went back to work. Vincent continued to come to the Bellagio on Tuesday evenings. He continued to order the same things, tip the same amount, and sit in the same corner. But something between him and Table 7 was different after that night. Not dramatically different, not in any way the other staff would have noticed, but different in the small ways that matter. He made eye contact with her when she set his coffee down. Real eye contact, not the absent, looking through you kind. He asked her name one evening, 3 weeks later, quietly and without any of his associates hearing. She told him. He nodded once, the way people nod when they are storing something carefully, and said nothing else. She didn't push. She didn't need to. About 6 months after that Tuesday evening, word began to circulate. Through the newspapers, through the courthouses, through the kind of quiet conversations that happen in certain parts of New York, that Vincent Caruso had begun cooperating with federal authorities. The details were complicated, as these things always are. There was legal pressure involved, and age, and the particular weariness that sometimes catches up with men who have spent decades outrunning it. Nobody could point to one single reason. These things are never one single reason. Rosa heard about it the way most people did. She read a small item in a newspaper on the subway one morning on her way to her day job. She read it twice. Then she folded the newspaper, set it on her lap, and looked out the window at the tunnel walls rushing past in the dark. She thought about a man staring into a small espresso cup, like he was looking for something he had misplaced a long time ago. She thought about 32 years of silence. She thought about the note she still kept, folded inside the cover of a notebook on her desk at home, written in careful, deliberate handwriting by a man who, for one unguarded moment in a back hallway of a restaurant, had allowed himself to be seen. She hoped, quietly and without drama, that he had found a little bit of whatever it was he had been looking for. People always talk about power like it is the opposite of vulnerability, like the more powerful a person becomes, the less they feel, the less they need, the less they are touched by the ordinary things that move the rest of us. But that is not really how it works. Power can buy distance. It can buy silence. It can surround you with people who will never say an uncomfortable thing to your face for as long as you live. But it cannot buy the feeling of being honestly seen by another person. That is the one thing money and fear and reputation cannot purchase. And sometimes, the people who seem the most armored are exactly the ones who are most starved for it. A young woman from the Bronx figured this out on her own, standing in a kitchen under a flickering fluorescent light, holding a piece of torn notepaper. She didn't save anyone. She didn't change the world. She just said a true thing to a human being who needed to hear it, and trusted that the truth was enough. It was, New York City, late 1990s, true story,